Welcome back, everyone, to Recrafting Gardens for a Changed World. I'm Joan Thomas, your Association's Director of External Relations. We have such an exciting program for you today. Our plenary today is sponsored by Longwood Garden Fellows Program and features author and NPR podcaster Jennifer Jewell. You'll then have the opportunity to select from 4 sessions twice over the course of the afternoon. We'll conclude with an important and very timely idea cafe exploring issues of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. As an association, we made an important statement earlier this month that many of you shared with your social media followers and members, along with many of your own garden statements against the institutionalized racism that has afflicted this country from its founding to today. We believe that our idea principles are not just words. They must be translated into actions. Today's Idea Cafe will help provide some means of putting those principles into action. Yesterday afternoon, I kicked off our conference fundraising campaign, 9,700 Strong, and I saw some of you made gifts, so thank you. Here's a quick look at where we are today. Don't forget to donate and add your name to the donor wall today. Thank you.
Hello from the Houston Botanic Garden, where we are under construction and on our way to grand open this fall.
Hi, everyone. I'm Casey Sklar, the Executive Director of the American Public Gardens Association. Before we get to Jennifer, we have another bit of business that we need to get to, and that's the presentation of our association's Service Award. Today, we highlight one of the great leaders of our entire profession and someone who's had an amazing impact on my personal life. Someone who's perhaps responsible for me sitting here as executive director as much as many other people. It's my pleasure to present the Association's Service Award to someone who's worked tirelessly on behalf of all public gardens and currently has the capability to lead one of our gardens, and that's Paul Redman of Longwood Gardens. Congratulations, Paul. From the bottom of my heart, our staff's heart, and our board's heart, we can think of no one better to receive the Association Service Award this year than you.
What a wonderful and belated honor has come to Paul Redman. Congratulations to you, Paul Redman. This is great.
Congratulations, Paul, on receiving the Association's Service Award. More than that, though, it's our chance to say thank you, to show appreciation for a leader. No matter where you've gone, you always raise the bar, and you did that in such a profound way for our association. You still do it today. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hi, Paul. Bill Lefebvre down at Duke Gardens. Just want to say hello and congratulate you on receiving the American Public Garden Association's Board Service Award. I can't think of anybody who's done more to move the association forward on its path from good to great over the last decade.
Hey, congratulations, Paul, my friend, on receiving the Association Service Award. I mean, who deserves this more, right? Come on, you do.
Congratulations, Paul, on receiving the Association Service Award.
Congratulations, Paul, on receiving the Association Service Award this year. Well deserved. Thank you for everything you've done to advance public gardens in North America and horticulture as a career path.
Congratulations, Paul, on winning the Service Award for APGA this year. Nobody is more deserving, and I wanted to say a personal thank you for all your support during my time on the board.
Hi, Paul. Mary Lynn from South Coast, and I just want to congratulate you on the Association Service Award. Thank you for being such a wonderful ally for me all these years. I remember our bus rides and the conversations where you gave me encouragement and the courage to find my own place in public gardens and be of service to others just as you have been for all of us. Thanks again and congratulations.
congratulations again on receiving the Association Service Award. I'll always remember your profound advice to me, which was, don't get up. Oh, I think I it up. Anyway, you did a fabulous job. Congratulations on the Service Award.
Hello, my name is Maylin Plummer. I'm a member of the American Public Garden Association. I'm also an IDEA committee member, that is Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility. And I'm also a recent Longwood Fellows graduate. It's my privilege today to introduce Jennifer Jewell. She's the creator and host of a public radio gardening program and podcast you may have heard of called Cultivating Place. In it, she engages in conversations on natural history and the human impulse to garden with people around the globe, talking about how and why we garden and what we mean when we garden. She's also the author of The Earth in Her Hands, 75 Extraordinary Women at Work in the World of Plants. And it was released just recently this past March. And this is what she will be speaking on today. She shines a spotlight on the significant contributions of women and how working in the world of plants is a more viable and creative career path for women than ever before. In it, she explores and celebrates how the plant world is improved by not only greater representation of women, but also by the diversity amongst these women. What I really loved about her talk and listening to it is that it is also a call to action, and that this book is not a final point. These women do not stand alone, and that it is up to all of us to shine a light on those that have uplifted us in our own experiences and journeys. Jennifer also speaks with a conviction in our ability to influence profound change and how essential gardens and gardeners are to the world. I think that this is the message we needed to hear right now in this time of uncertainty and instability. She connects us all and the strength of our bonds in a dramatically changing world. So I'm going to stop gushing now, and I will let her speak.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and I cannot tell you what a pleasure it is to be speaking with you today. I very much wish it was in person, but the joys of technology are allowing it to go forward in any event, and that is a privilege. So thank you to the APGA, and thank you to all of you who are listening. My name is Jennifer Jewell. I am the host of a public radio program and podcast entitled Cultivating Place, Conversations on Natural History and the Human Impulse to Garden. I am also the author of a new book published this March of 2020 entitled The Earth in Her Hands, 75 Extraordinary Women Working in the World of Plants. So these women are why we are here, and we're going to jump right into them. I just want to give you a tiny bit of background information. The public radio program and podcast began as far back as 2008, and in 2016 it expanded into its current iteration on public radio and as a podcast available worldwide. When Timber Press came to me in 2017 and asked for me to write a book on the current state of women in horticulture, they came knowing how I approached all gardening, all gardeners, and all horticulture. And that lens is one of a firm belief, a profoundly expansive belief in the power of gardeners and gardens and gardening to be intersectional agents for change in our world. And that is how I approach every conversation on my podcast, and that is how I approached my beginning to research and write the book. The Earth in Her Hands began as an idea of a new book on women in horticulture. The only part that Timber Press sort of gave me was, we do not want this to be a book about dead white women from England. And I said, That's great. I have you covered there. That is not what I am interested in writing about. And to write a book about women, just women, is to some extent inherently sexist in a world that needs a whole lot less sexism. But I took the request from Timber Press in its best, biggest sense, and that is to focus on representation, period. Representation of a diversity of women doing a diversity of innovative work in our world of horticulture in this day and age. I had to narrow it down. Otherwise, it would have gone on forever. I narrowed it down to 75 women whose work had come to the fore in the last 25 years. Now, I chose the last 25 years as sort of just a boundary to say, you know, what is most relevant right here, right now. Without question, the work of many, many women and humans actually built the foundation that these 75 women have created their careers on. Of course, you know, anyone is going to read this book and they're going to look at the list of 75 women and they are going to say, I cannot believe you forgot this one. Like, how did you not choose her? And my answer to you is this. I had to come up with a list. Constraints are healthy in many ways. And this list is not a final point. It is not a final discussion of all women in horticulture at this time in every way that you might see them. So consider this an invitation to look around the table you might be sitting at, the colleagues you might be working with, the community in which you garden and engage in horticulture, and say, who are the other names we should be lifting up? Where is the other work that is making our world a better place? And keep adding to that list. We should all be adding to that list with our own work and with the names and work of other humans that are making this world a better place. The first thing I did when I then started to create my final list was I said, where are the areas of interest to me and that I think are of interest in the world right now, where innovative things are happening, where we are being pushed to think about horticulture in its biggest ways. And I came up with these areas within horticulture that I considered to be important. Now, what's interesting is that I'm sitting here talking to you, or standing here talking to you, who is the APGA, and nowhere in this do you see women in public horticulture. And the reason for that is that women in public gardens fit into every one of these categories. So I came up with these categories, and then I said, who are the women within these broader categories who are doing interesting work in interesting places? I was looking for the greatest diversity of women that I could find to be representative of these arenas. So there was not an age requirement. There was not an educational background requirement. I wanted to get the broadest representation that I could, and representation becomes a really important theme as we go forward. The youngest woman that I interviewed for the book was 26 at the time, and the oldest was 83. They come from England and Ireland and Scotland and Australia and Japan and India and the United States and Canada, among others. Representation is important for a variety of reasons. Some of the categories that you just saw listed have long been inhabited by women and women's strong leading voices. Others have not been. Women in leadership positions in public gardens is one of the areas in which women have not had broad representation for a very long time. And when you put even one woman into a field that has not long had women in those positions of leadership and decision-making, you change everything. And I'll show you why. To have just one woman be named a director of a public garden, which a major public botanic garden in the US, that didn't happen until 1972, when the Brooklyn Botanic Garden named Elizabeth Schultz their executive director. Interestingly, Elizabeth Schultz just passed away in May of this year during the COVID crisis and pandemic. You add one woman to this career field and you change access for all women who are coming after her. You put one woman in a field in which there have not been women in leadership positions, and you change the experiential diversity being brought to that entire field. You change the experiential diversity sitting at that decision-making table, and you change the values and priorities with which decisions are being made. The minute you do that, you change what leadership looks like. And when you change what leadership looks like, you start to change everything of importance in our culture. You change the economic environment. You change the cultural priorities. You change and affect, hopefully for the better, the communal well-being, the possibility for social justice, and the possibility for lasting environmental health. So this is the book, The Earth in Her Hands. I cover women in all of those fields, and I cover women doing all of those impacts. It was very clear to me right from the beginning of doing this research that focusing on women in public gardens was going to be a major thread in the women I was looking at and talking to. I'm now going to introduce you to a handful of the women in public gardens who I interviewed for the book. Susan Pell is the Deputy Executive Director for the U.S. Botanic Garden. It is our oldest and one of our largest botanic gardens in the country. It is free of charge, which is a remarkable thing in a large city. It is based on the idea that having a botanic garden for the entire U.S. is of importance, and it goes back to information and values that our founding fathers held. I'm guessing they were also held by our founding mothers, but they weren't given a lot of say in that at the time. One of the things that I love about Susan is that she is the perfect complement of both nerdy science geek and absolute plant lover. And one of the things that she loves is deep, nitty-gritty, very esoteric research into the cashew family. But here's what she also loves. She loves educating. She loves being not just behind a desk or in a research lab, but actually on the floor or on the grounds of the garden, talking to people about what she calls the awesomeness of plants every day. Cindy, or Cynthia Brown, is the manager of the horticulture collections and education for the Smithsonian Gardens. Now, it's interesting because when I say Smithsonian, you think museums, and of course you're gardeners, so you know what I'm talking about. Most people will think of the Smithsonian and they think of indoor spaces and curated exhibits on walls inside. In fact, Smithsonian Gardens is all of the gardens around all of those museums that you think of. And the way I like to think of it is that Cynthia is that mom who puts spinach in something that is otherwise delicious and is not able to tell that there's spinach there. So the kids eat it and think, I didn't just eat spinach. Not that I think of our gardens as spinach. I think of our gardens as beautiful and wonderful. But if you're not a natural garden lover and you're coming to gardens for the first time, Cynthia makes it easy and beautiful. The gardens around all of the museums at the Smithsonian are one of the ways that it becomes clear that gardens are part of everything, and they relate to all of the diversity of interests and topics that the museums at the Smithsonian are covering inside. And one of the things that I find fascinating about how she approaches gardens is that the museums on the inside are often talking about controversial issues. They're talking about histories and cultures and technologies that are sometimes hard for people to understand and hard for people to connect in. But what she has noticed is it doesn't matter if you're talking about racism or if you're talking about pollinator decline or you're talking about the beauty of a rose. All of these things are easier to talk about, engage in, hear, and learn when you're standing in a garden doing it. Mary Pat Matheson is the president of the Atlanta Botanical Garden in Atlanta, Georgia. The first two leaders that I was speaking about were in large cultural institutions that embrace a diversity of ideas, and they have for many, many, many years. The Atlanta Botanical Garden is located in Atlanta and is a relatively young Botanical Garden. And Mary Pat came to be the president at a time when, like many of our cultural institutions in the country, there was declining membership, there was declining attendance, and there was declining income. And there was concern about the viability of this garden. When Mary Pat moved there from Red Butte Garden in Utah, what she understood was that her garden was sitting in a metropolis, in a city, an urban environment, in which the population demographics was wildly different than the people who were the demographics of the visitors to the Atlanta Botanical Garden, to the demographics of the membership and the donors. And that she understood that her garden was somehow and for some reason not serving the greater population of this city. She brought all of her gardening and human brain storming and problem solving to the table when she thought about how she could address this. And she did it in such a way that she included everyone in the problem solving. Now, I think a lot of you will understand that that is not necessarily an innovative thing now, that you bring all the stakeholders to the table. But at the time that Mary Pat was doing this, that was not standard practice yet. And when she realized that the majority of the population in Atlanta was not of the white, middle-class, affluent demographic, but that's who the garden was serving, she determined to change this, not from one level, but from a multiplicity of approaches and dimensions and layers of the garden. She did this first by getting a committee of people together to look at this with her. So it wasn't just one person problem solving, but a variety of stakeholders. And then she addressed the issue with this team from the top down. She got a grant to make membership accessible and free for something like a 3 to 5 year period of time for all of the public servants within the city of Atlanta. Now, she didn't just want to get people to the garden. She wanted to get people to the garden and actually make the garden relevant to get them. She wanted to make them feel welcome, and she wanted to make them feel represented, and she wanted this garden to be genuinely relevant to them. So she didn't just get them there. She got them there for a long enough period of time that she could also survey what they were interested in, what they wanted to see, what they wanted to hear. Same time, she developed a partnership with the historically Black colleges in the area to improve internships and fellowships in the garden with these classes. So that you saw people of a diversity of backgrounds and cultures actually teaching and leading in these spaces, so that if you came to the garden, you also saw a diversity of people working there at the garden. At the same time, she also developed a collaboration with the public school systems of Atlanta to make sure that students were not only volunteering and interning, and by this I mean high school students and lower school students were volunteering and interning at the museum, but they were also coming, to the garden, but that they were also attending in school curriculum and program related field trips to the garden. And so this, at a time when botanic gardens across the country were losing membership and losing visitorship and losing funding, Mary Pat Matheson turned this around completely in Atlanta, and she is a role model that anyone can take a look at. On the other side of the country, in a different form of access, Carol Bornstein is the director of the Nature Gardens at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. Now, Los Angeles is the densest and largest metropolis in our country today. It has one of the largest diversity of cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds, and it is one of the hardest metropolises to actually get out of in order to find real nature. In a time when there is a lot of focus on cultural gardens and edible gardening, the whole focus of this garden in Los Angeles is to introduce nature back into an urban environment and to introduce urban dwellers to nature as they might find it, both in the urban environment and outside of the urban environment. The gardens comprise what used to be an asphalt parking lot and has become a habitat garden focused solely on supporting wildlife within the urban environment, so that more and more people who are further and further separated from the wild nature of our world have a place to actually meet it and learn about it and not be intimidated by it, and then to recognize it and appreciate it and steward it once they might meet it outside of that urban environment. In a similar vein, back across on the other side of the country in Texas, the Wildflower Center, which is originally the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center outside of Austin, Texas, is doing some similar work there with the native plants, not only of Texas, they consider themselves to be the botanic garden for the state of Texas, but also for a great part of the Southeast. They are working on preservation of species and documentation, as well as ecosystem work and fire study, this kind of thing. Andrea DeLong Amaya is at work there, and she is the director of horticulture there. And one of their mandates, which is very interestingly similar to what Carol is doing in Los Angeles, is making sure that not only are they conserving and preserving and collecting the wild flora, the native flora of the region and the larger southeastern bioregion, but that they are introducing this in the garden in a way that is a model for people visiting to say, I want to include natives in my garden. I want to improve the sustainability and the connection between my garden and the climate and geology and wildlife of my area. As any native plant enthusiast knows, one of the greatest drawbacks to being a native plant gardener is the ability to actually get some of those native plants that we see and successfully care for them in the garden. Andrea DeLong Amaya is taking the actions and developing the curriculum and programs to make that less of a problem there, and to make a easily modelable program for others to follow. You know, gardens are, of course, as complex as anything in our world. They are cultural artifacts, they are cultural mirrors, and they come with all the complexity that our cultures come with. Peggy Cornett is a wonderful example of someone working at an intersection of great complexity and delicacy and difficulty. Working at Monticello, the estate garden and foundation named for and started by Thomas Jefferson. She has an enormous interest in not only the horticulture that was supported and espoused by Thomas Jefferson, but also some of the complexity that comes at working with a cultural organization that is also built upon a legacy and history of enslaved people, and enslaved people who were actually helping with that horticulture and the development of gardens and grounds that then become this world leader, and trying to bridge that unity of opposites of how can this greatness be true and this terribleness be true at the same time. This is not an issue that is alive and well at Monticello. It is alive and well at all of our gardens across all of our country. And it is one that I think role models like Peggy and like what Monticello are doing to not greenwash the issues, but to bring them into the light and say, how do we change this narrative? How do we open this narrative so that everyone is included and it feels like a reparation in itself, to give that narrative back to the truth of how things happened, why they happened, and what do we do from here with them. The work she's doing there is absolutely valuable for all of us to look at, because as another woman in the book, the writer Jamaica Kincaid states, the garden brings us the world, and the world is a messy place. And if we in our gardens cannot figure out how to address the issues of racism and bring them into the light to talk about them, then we are not doing enough of what we should be doing. Another form of access that I think public gardens and leadership in public gardens are doing great work in is the access for those who are not physically or mentally or emotionally abled in the same way that what we consider mainstream or normal to be. The field of horticultural therapy is a burgeoning field in our world. And as we know, and especially in this moment of COVID and the pandemic, it is more and more needed in a world that is full of hurt and wound and separation and in need of healing. Horticultural therapy is a fantastic possibility. At the Chicago Botanic Garden, they have a wonderful horticultural therapy program, both on the ground in display gardens and in programs for visitors, but also in training people to be horticultural therapists and in the field of evidence-based design. And I think this is a really important thing in our entire horticultural world, is people will say, well, it's a garden, it's green, it's full of flowers, it's healing, like I feel better already just being in the garden. But the fact is that not everybody experiences any one garden in the exact same way. And I'll give you one example that another woman in the book, Claire Cooper Marcus, who actually is a visiting instructor at the Chicago Botanic Garden and colleagues with Barb Kresge, who is the director of the horticulture, or was, she is now retired, was the director of the horticultural therapy program there. Pointed out to me is that if you are a hospital, public hospital, say for instance, and you want to put in a healing garden because it seems like a good value added for your patients, if you do not do the work necessary for what your patients need, you could get it very badly wrong. If you are a returning veteran of war suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and the hospital has put the garden near, say, the loading dock, and there are noises that you can't control, that is not a therapeutic space. If you are a cancer survivor going through chemotherapy and you experience nausea in sort of every cell of your body, and the hospital has put the healing garden next to the cafeteria, and there are strong scents and odors coming out, that is not healing for you. So the importance of evidence-based design as modeled by what's happening at the Chicago Botanic Garden, and then the teaching and sharing of those evidence-based design research data forward to the teachers who will take it out into the world is incredibly important. Finally, I want to get to a couple of different ways that public gardens are working to model for us new ways of expanding the horticultural world and its power and impact. And that is through exhibitions. Karen Dobman is at the New York Botanical Garden. She is the Associate Vice President for Exhibitions and Public Engagement at the New York Botanical Garden. Now, she's been there for many years, and I believe it was the 2015 exhibit of the Frida Kahlo work that really kind of coalesced around this idea that it is often not in the exact plant, say, of the display gardens or plants of the display gardens. It's not necessarily in the research. It's not necessarily in the data. It is in the way presentation changes and engages with visitors so that they can see horticulture differently, so that it's not horticulture in isolation or in a vacuum, but is very directly relevant to our lives every day. Now, let me give you an example of that. If I say the word Frida or the name Frida Kahlo to you, you might not say gardener. But what Karen and the exhibitions department, and now exhibition departments in botanical gardens across the country, are clear on is that you don't have to be a well-known or famous or really successful gardener for gardens and horticulture to be meaningful to you. We all know this. And so to bring this lens of the importance of horticulture through the eyes of someone we see as artistic and culturally interesting, all of a sudden opens up horticulture to being everything. which as people who love plants, we know it to be. But if we can get the people who don't know it to see it that way, then we have just turned a key that is powerful for everybody of all ages, of all genders, of all socioeconomic backgrounds. One of the things that Karen noted about this particular exhibit was that it was the first one that was bilingual. It had all of its signage and interpretive materials were both in Spanish and in English. And given where the NYBG is located in the Bronx of borough of New York, they had never seen the attendance of such a large diversity of people until that exhibit. And I think that right there speaks more than anything. And of course, not all of the gardens that are represented in the audience listening to me, that are represented in our world today, are big city, urban, well-endowed public entities. A lot of them, many of the gardens on the ground doing work in our communities are small, regionally based. They have small staffs, they have small spaces, and yet the work that they're doing with their visitors and as models for other public gardens and gardeners who are not engaged in public gardening are still really powerful, and they have a lot of potential. Gwen Stouffer is the executive director of Lotus Land. The legacy garden of Ganawalska Lotus Land is its full title, named for the woman, Ganawalska, who was an extraordinary, larger-than-life artistic socialite who developed this incredible collection of specifically cacti and succulents in her Santa Barbara home. Now, Gwen is dealing with some of the issues that smaller gardens have to deal with every day around our country, and that is it was a residential space that turned into a public garden, but it's still in a residential community. It is in the middle of a small town who have their own codes and zones, and they have a limited capacity for visitorship because of these residential zones and codes. And so this constant working with the community in which you exist, as opposed to being the entity that defines how the neighborhood or community is an important one for other small gardens to look at and say, how did she navigate this? How did she develop donors? How did she, even with a limited visitorship capacity, how did she develop the idea that this was not an elitist institution for only a few people to visit, but was widely accessible by everyone in her community? And it's one of the questions I think that our gardens will have to ask ourselves throughout our future going forward, especially when you consider social distancing and small groups being part of the regulations for at least the foreseeable future. And I think one of the biggest things is to just not ever accept the status quo, to say, if this is the problem, how do I creatively solve it? How do I get what I know I want this garden to be available to as many people as I want it to be? When I look at all of these women in public gardens, I am, amazed at their tenacity, and I am amazed at their resilience, and I am amazed at the problem solving and collaborative nature and communal desires that they bring to the table. In some cases, they came from other careers into this work, and I just can't overstate the important roles that public gardens serve in bringing horticulture to the world and bringing the world to horticulture. This is a full list of the women that are in the book. And I would say that whether or not they're in a public garden that is part of the APGA, all gardeners are public gardeners to some extent, whether that's with your kids or with your family or with the front garden that neighbors walk by. We all have something to share. I want to end with this slide, not with a member of the APGA, but as you will recall, we were meant to be in Portland, Oregon at this time, communing together as public garden lovers. And we were supposed to be at the Portland Japanese Garden. And we aren't. We're here online watching from our separate places. But even in that separation, there is connection to be made and to be perceived and appreciated. This is Midori Shintani. She is the director of horticulture for the Millennium Forest in Tokaido, Japan. The Millennium Forest was an endeavor that was begun by the largest newspaper producer and publisher and chain in Japan. And they started the forest as a carbon offset to what they understood to be the impact of their industry. And the garden includes not only lots of native Japanese flora, but also display cultural gardens from around the world. And this is of deep interest to Midori, who is the director of horticulture. And she brings this just incredible joy and reverence to her work that I think is, it's my favorite picture in the whole book because it kind of sums up everything that I love about the work that we as horticultural lovers and advocates bring. It is this reverence for the plants that we are partnering with. It is a reverence for the larger landscapes in which we work, whether those are human or natural environments. And it is this partnership between us and the plants. And then I think about her feet on that ground all the way across the globe in Japan. And I think about, we often think of our footprints as things that are heavy and destructive. But then you think about something like the connection of mycelial networks, or you think about the pathways that bees make going from one plant to another. And I think about Midori's feet on that ground, and if I draw an imperceptible line across the globe from her feet to my feet, from my feet to your feet, from the feet of every gardener in their places connecting to all other gardeners or gardens, and I think of the power of that network of connection, and I have a great deal of hope for our world. In our current time of both division and separation from nature and from one another, a time that too many people refer to as the age of loneliness, made even more acutely true by the COVID-19 pandemic. I see public gardens as sitting in a valuable and desperately needed position of welcoming, of inspiring, of informing, and of including. And I want to end with this quote by Dr. Casey Sklar, the executive director of the APGA, in which he stresses that the urgent and evolving role of public gardens is to knit the social fabric of our communities and to address our global challenges. You are all doing that, and we all have the capacity to do more. So look to one another and raise each other up and keep up the good work.
Hello, everyone. We have Jennifer Jewell here with us, and she has agreed to answer some of your questions. So thank you so much for being with us. I absolutely loved the statement about touching the mycelium. I feel like we are all beautifully connected here today as well with her. There she is. Hi, Jennifer. Thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm beyond thrilled to be here.
Thank you. We have some great questions coming in, and I think this is a really special circumstance, I think, for our members, because you're out there. I mean, you're on tour perhaps from your house some of the time right now, but you're really getting out there with some stories that are public garden stories, and I think a lot of our members are curious how the public in general is reacting to these stories, their stories in some ways. And also, you know, if you can give us some advice about how we tell these stories as an industry and our association, you know, we would love to know how to improve the way we tell the stories that you're telling. Do you have advice for us?
Maybe not advice so much as I can share experiences of being on tour or being in conversation with people. And I'm, you know, seeing some of these great questions coming through. I think that, first of all, when I speak to groups that aren't necessarily garden groups, maybe like a public garden group, there is, I think, great relief to hear that there is agency in what we do and that it is up to us to make that agency what it needs to be. I think when I was giving a talk in Portland for the Hardy Plant Society of Oregon early this last winter, so sometime in January, but, you know, and this was in January, and there is a whole section where I am talking about the work of Jamaica Kincaid, who is the novelist whose work, My Garden Book, which was published in 1999, really was a seminal piece of collection of writing about racism inherent in horticulture. The importance of us seeing that for what it is and choosing to make different narratives going forward, choosing to have difficult conversations, I think is the beginning. And I think we're seeing that across the globe right now, of course, that, you know, but it's not like that's a new need. That's a need that's been here forever. And so I am, as uncomfortable as this time might be, I also see great possibility in that discomfort, because it's making all of us think bigger and hopefully think better about who is in this world and who we encourage here. And I see a great question from an anonymous attendee calling attention to the fact that all of the women in public horticulture that I just featured were all of the white middle class, middle age sort of demographic. And I think that is an affliction of our horticultural world that's a legacy from way back. And I would say even last year, if I had been preparing to write the book, this would start to look different. And in 1 year, this is going to look much different. And I hope that all people who are still on the line listening will attend the idea session at 4 o'clock, because one of the attendees there, the speakers there, Abra Lee, is one of the just graduated Longwood Fellows. And she is a fantastic woman, a Black woman in horticulture. And it is programs like Longwood, it's programs like, you know, who is being hired at Monticello. It is what those students that Mary Pat Matheson is seeding through her high school collaborations and her historically Black college collaborations. They are the pipeline that are going to change what this leadership table looks like. And it's already happening, but it just wasn't quite there in 2017 and 18 when I was asked to write and research the book. So there are a great number of Black women in gardens, Indigenous women in the horticultural world, a lot of different ages and backgrounds throughout the book. They just weren't yet in this leadership position in public horticulture, but they're coming.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for speaking to that. And thank you also for mentioning the Idea Cafe today, which I think people will find a really, really valuable experience.
I do as well.
It's a very intimate conversation about this. And you know, I really appreciate how you and many women right now are being extremely frank and straightforward with sharing sharing what we need to hear, honestly. So I did get another question that you just touched on, really, just about how to bring more diversity into the public garden world. And certainly connecting and engaging with young people is a really great path for that. And we have wonderful examples of that going on in many public gardens. I'm curious if you're finding, just going back also to this, exploration of how people are reacting to these stories, are you finding younger audiences are catching on to this story as well?
Yeah, it's a funny thing, I look exactly like the demographic we're trying to expand, change, broaden. And one of the great stories that I tell when I talk about this research project for the book was going to a wonderful woman, Ava Bynum. She was the youngest woman when I first interviewed her. She founded a program called Hudson Valley Seed in the north, upstate New York. And she, non-gender binary, really interested in education. So Hudson Valley Seed is not a seed company. It is an education school garden program. So I first interviewed her, and I asked her all these questions about, school gardening, la, la, la. I went back, I wrote her profile, and I was really proud of myself. I had done all of this research on the history of school gardens and, how important they were. And I contextualized them around the Industrial Revolution and, the need for green spaces in cities. And I brought the profile back to her, and she wrote me back within about 5 minutes and said, "This is not what I'm talking about at all. You got this all wrong." And it was one of those moments where you're like, whoa, okay, enormous blind spot. Tell me, what are we talking about? And her whole point was that at this moment, school garden education is often exactly that Western white supremacist approach of, this is how we garden, and this is how we're going to teach you to garden. And so people will say to me, I go to horticultural societies, to garden clubs, and they, I'm looking at people who look just like me, and they say, but young people don't want to garden. They're on their phones all the time. Or, Black people don't want to garden. They do something else. Like, we just can't find them. And I will tell you without question, the answer is never whoever they are, don't want to garden. Everybody gardens. Young people are gardening in greater numbers probably than they have ever gardened. They just aren't gardening where you are if you are saying that sentence. And so the onus is not on them to show up at our garden club meetings. The onus is on us to find them where they are, to follow them, to listen to them, to learn from them, and then to move forward with a greater understanding. The answer is never, they don't want to garden. Everybody wants to garden. And we, of all people, know that more than anyone. So if we just open our lenses that much wider, the better off everyone will be, and the more truly, authentically representative our gardens, our public gardens, and us as gardeners will be.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, Jewell. I wish we had even more time to talk to you about this, and that was really wonderful. I know a lot of folks are asking what's the next book, and they're loving they're loving your podcast, they're loving your book. I think we should thank you again so very much for coming today. Let's find out how everyone can get a discount on your book if they haven't already purchased it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. There are 2 awards of merit and a special presentation from our partners at the U.S. Forest Service coming up next. Just a reminder, if you are interested in Jennifer's book, The Earth in Her Hands, Timber Press is offering association members 35% off as a discount on all those titles purchased on timberpress.com. Use the code APGA when ordering. If you need to reference this again throughout the conference, go to Jennifer's bio on our conference website for full detail.
Greetings from the Abby Aldrich Rockefeller Garden in Seal Harbor, Maine. I'm Erin Dilworth, the lead gardener, and we're excited about this gardening season. Have a good one. Bye.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Garcia Chance, Outreach Manager for the Association. If, like me, you were going to be missing the conference poster session, I've got some fantastic news for you. Check out the Association's Facebook page at facebook.com/public gardens, and you'll find several posters submitted for this year's conference pinned to the top of our wall. Take a look at the posters and post any questions or comments you might have for the presenters who are monitoring these pages throughout conference. You can also interact with folks on our social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn using the hashtag #recrafting2020. Finally, if you've been enjoying the conference, a specific session, speaker, or presentation, consider making a short video clip like the ones you've seen from gardens saying hello and send it to me, lchance@publicgardens.org, and you just may see yourself on this very screen sometime next week.
Welcome to the Tucson Botanical Gardens from Tucson, Arizona.
Hi everyone, I'm Tyler Hale, Program Manager at the Association. Before you move on to your next session, we want to take a moment and recognize two exceptional members with awards of merit. The Award of Merit recognizes an American Public Gardens Association member who has performed with distinction throughout a long career in public horticulture. We are pleased to present two awards of merit this year. The first recipient is the embodiment of what a gardener should represent, humble with a selfless commitment and devotion to fostering something greater than himself that will long outlast his lifetime. He has served his garden with heartfelt dedication and energy as a designer, leader, teacher, advocate, and caretaker. The Association is pleased to present the Award of Merit to Portland Japanese Gardens Garden Curator Sadafumi Uchiyama. Our second awardee will soon be retiring after a 37-year career at the University of Tennessee, where she is an associate professor in the Department of Plant Sciences and director of the University of Tennessee Gardens. A leader in advocating, formulating, and maintaining a plant sciences major concentration in public horticulture at a time when few higher learning institutions offered a pathway to train future public garden leaders, she collaborated with other pioneers in the academic public horticulture field, developed curricula, and recruited students. Hundreds of her students in the disciplines of public horticulture and ornamental horticulture are in leadership positions in the private and public sectors, including horticultural business, public and private gardens, and in academia. The association is pleased to present the Award of Merit to Dr. Susan Hamilton.
there, Richie from the Miller Garden here with Dell and Brian on there on a nice, beautiful summer Northwest day. There, hope everyone's doing well.
The United States Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, and the American Public Gardens Association have been proud partners for well over a decade. Our work together spans many different ecosystems and many different thrusts, including gene conservation of plant material, especially unique plant material, and then also communication and outreach efforts, including their presenting partner status for this conference. We thank you, United States Forest Service, and here is a special message from our partner, the U.S. Forest Service.
Hello, my name is Barney Gant. I'm a Deputy Regional Forester located in the Pacific Southwest region of the Forest Service, also known as Region 5. The Forest Service is a diverse organization of over 30,000 people responsible for managing 193 million acres of public land spread across the United States from Puerto Rico to Alaska. The lands we manage are incredibly diverse, from the rainforests in the Pacific Northwest to the arid Southwest to the tall grass prairies. Our jobs are as diverse as the landscapes we manage, but every one of them contributes to fulfilling the mission of the Forest Service. Many of us have wondered how we fit into the Forest Service and how our jobs contribute to the agency mission. Let's meet a few of the fantastic men and women who work very hard in support of this mission.
My name is Richard Gonzalez, and I manage for healthy, sustainable forests and to keep forested lands forested.
My name is Tanya Wilkinson. I work at the Albuquerque Service Center Budget and Finance offices. I supervise a team of budget analysts that serve as liaisons to our budget partners across all regions, stations, and areas.
My name is Mike Mascarenis. My duties include patrolling National Forest lands, investigating any resource damage, protecting the public, employees, and natural resources.
My name is Erwin Chambliss, and I help people identify invasive plants in the southeastern United States.
I'm Danelle D. Harrison, and I'm responsible for the management of 560,000 acres of National Forest System lands. I do this in collaboration with partners and stakeholders, as well as other Forest Service employees.
I am Ivan Gonzalez. I support the Forest Service in its communications efforts through network, computers, and telecoms, and radios.
I'm Susan Alden-Weingart, and I have an awesome job. I get the great pleasure of working with all kinds of people across communities and landscapes to introduce our young people to the great outdoors.
My name is Linda Joyce, and I work at the Rocky Mountain Research Station in Fort Collins, Colorado. And my research focuses on quantifying the effects of climate change on ecosystems and natural resources.
The Forest Service employs thousands of people who work behind the scenes, as well as directly implementing projects in the field. Our connections are much deeper than what we see at the surface. Each of us contributes in our own way to sustaining our nation's forests and grasslands, delivering benefits to the public, helping the global natural resource community make better management decisions, and making the Forest Service a high-performing agency. It takes all of us in all of our jobs for the Forest Service to succeed in its mission.
I am the forest silviculturist for the Kaibab and Coconino National Forest. I sustain our nation's forests and grasslands. I am the Forest Service.
I'm a supervisory budget analyst, and I help ensure the Forest Service ability to manage its funding. And by ensuring that, I also ensure that critical personnel on the ground delivering the programs have the financial ability to do so. I am the Forest Service.
I'm a law enforcement officer on the Jewell National Forest. The benefits I provide to the public is that I connect them to the outdoors. I am the Forest Service.
I'm an invasive plant specialist with the Southern Research Station, and my work helps sustain our nation's forest and grasslands. I am the Forest Service.
I am a district ranger for the Williams and Tucson Ranger Districts on the Kaibab National Forest. It is my pleasure to promote not only inclusive culture, but recruit a diverse workforce, which ultimately helps us excel as a high-performing agency. I am the Forest Service.
I'm a service area technician with the Chief Information Office. My work directly supports the transfer of technology and application. I am the Forest Service.
I am the partnership liaison for the Rocky Mountain region of the U.S. Forest Service. I deliver benefits to the public by connecting people to the great outdoors. I am the Forest Service.
I am a research ecologist, and my research helps sustain our nation's forests and grasslands. I am the Forest Service.
I'm an information technology specialist.
I'm an initial tag dispatcher.
I am the Chief of Staff and Assistant Director for the Forest Service Job Corps program.
I'm a general engineer with the Forest Operations Research Unit in Auburn, Alabama.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am
the Forest
Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest
I
Service.
am the Forest Service.
I am the Forest Service.
Yo soy Forest Service.
I am
the Forest Service.
We are the Forest Service.
To our friends at APGA from the Atlanta Botanical Garden.
Life lives on!
Hi, I'm Tommy Rosenbluth, Program Coordinator for the Association. One of my favorite parts of the conference every year is the student presentations. Join us on Tuesday, July 7th to see some of the future leaders of the public horticulture industry share their latest research findings. These student presentations provide a valuable opportunity for established professionals to learn new and exciting findings from their future peers. That's the 4 p.m. session on Tuesday, July 7th. See you there.